Doug wants to give us an update. It's about the halfway point between the last trip and the next one. So would you welcome Doug Stewart?
Well, we're exactly halfway between the trip last January and the trip next January, so I thought it would be a good time to have a bit of an update. This is a ministry that our church supports, and I also personally support it on top of that. It's based on Acts 1:8, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. It's predominantly based down on the Texas-Mexico border. There's a number of missionaries that get supported as a result of this. Started 23 years ago in Southern California. It's now grown to at least 40 churches across the country that all support this. It's all supported by donations and fundraisers that the men who go to the ministry support. And my technical skills didn't work last night. I wanted to put up a nice color slide of the brochure for the annual golf classic that's going to happen next month down in Southern California. Not to convince you to go play golf, but there's a really interesting list on that slide that touched me when I saw it. In the past year, Power has partnered with, and they've broken this down into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, to match Acts 1:8. In Jerusalem, which is Riverside County, Young Life Riverside spreading the gospel in local high schools, Rebirth Homes, battling human trafficking, and GlowCal assisting in various feeding programs. In Judea, the United States, Rick Kaywood Ministries, trucking food to various locations across the country, U.S. Border Patrol, law enforcement Bibles for agents in Texas, and Mike McGee Ministries providing Bibles to law enforcement officers across the U.S. In Samaria, and some of these are projects that we actually worked on last January, Beans and Rice delivered 500,000 pounds to numerous ministries. Okay? Children's festivals for thousands of families in Reynosa, Refugio de Niños, which is a orphanage, air conditioning units for 11 classrooms at that orphanage. Kaleo Ministries provided funds for a cargo van and built a storage unit. We actually worked on that storage unit. Leonardo Vicario School built a medical center in Acuna. We actually worked on that. Senda de Vida, you've heard Tim and I talk about that. Supplied food and supplies for this refuge center in Reynosa for the entire year. Okay? And that's where they have 5,000 to 7,000 refugees sitting in a spot waiting for a chance to come across the border. Supplied 19 missionaries with monthly financial support along the border. And then Ends of the Earth, Elam Ministries, Bibles for hundreds of new believers in Iran and Turkey. Operation Mobilization provided funding for a church plant in northern Israel. Purity Project Feminine products for 500 women from a village in Nairobi, Kenya. And financially supported ministry projects in 30 countries worldwide. So it's God's really moving. My heart is to send double next year. I'd like to send 6 to 8 people on this trip. It's only $900. I know it sounds like a lot, but you start saving your money now, it's pretty easy to get there. And then you buy your own plane ticket. So for about $1,500, you can go along a trip with 50 to 60 other men, and I guarantee you someone's life will be changed. It might even be yours.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just as the missions director, it's like this, that from the very beginning, this is the exact answer to prayer, is Doug stepping up and saying, hey, I got a place to go and serve, and you can see why we're excited about plugging into that. And if you're at all, feel like God's tugging on your heart at all to go on that trip, come talk to him afterwards, and go get your passport now. If you don't have your passport, and there's other, we talked a while ago about other short-term trips, and we don't have anything concrete yet, but there was a lot of responses, like people were like, yeah, I want to go to Africa, I want to go to Papua. I want to go to Washington, D.C., and we talked about those different trips. So if you're at all still like God's putting on your heart to go on Power Ministries or to any of those other trips that we're still looking at details of working out and dates, it's probably not going to happen this winter, but maybe as early as next spring. Come talk to me and come talk to Doug and just get that kind of, if God's putting it on your heart at all, come talk to us, because then we can follow up and make plans and see who it is that God's calling. And whether you've already been on short-term trips or you've never been, especially, I really encourage you to take that step and go do it, because it is really life-impacting. And I was just thinking, the communion and just the testimonies in the park last week, we see what Jesus does, and what, as we see what his body and blood overcomes the world, and it is the only hope, in our culture these last several years, where we get concerned about stuff, but God in the early church during communion, and he overcomes the culture, and he is our only hope. And when he talked about, to Peter about strengthening the brethren, his really own command is to go make disciples of all nations. And he said, do communion in remembrance of me and go make disciples. That's basically what he left us with to do. And making disciples is really to strengthen the brethren, not just go get them saved and in the door, but make disciples and strengthen them, like you're saying. So it's all part of missions. And Chris, if you want to come on up, we got Chris for sharing this morning about what is happening in Malawi and how God's making disciples there. And if you don't know, we helped last year pay for a water well on a trip, and now they're building a community center. And it's just cool to see Chris's heart for Malawi and what God's doing there, and we're all a part of this. So again, when he's sharing with this, we've already been apart for over a year now, and this is a strategic part of our making disciples of the nations as a church. This is one place we're plugging into. So as he's sharing, it's really about what we're plugged into too, not just Chris and his ministry, but we're a big part of that. So
I got this one.
oh yeah.
Am I on? All right, cool. So just to understand that as we're working on this, the guys back there, I told them at the very beginning, I use a term that might seem a little derogatory. I said I'm tech-tarded, meaning that my technology skills are really, really bad. So if there's any errors on the technology side, it's not them, it's me. So, okay, well, thank you so much for having me. It is just such a blessing to be with you guys. You guys, I don't really consider you like a church that I'm visiting. You guys are family. I know so many of you, and so many of you guys have played a significant part in my life since my salvation. The pastor of this church is my brother-in-law, and him and my sister, they prayed me into the kingdom, right? And then shortly after that, I met my good friend Scott and Sarah, who I was Scott's roommate for 3 years, and so it's just these different pieces that have, played significant pieces of my life. Pastor Don Calkins was on my first board when I first launched into ministry at the YMCA. He was one of my advisors on my board. And so this church has sown into me a ton. I could go on throughout. Every time I look around, I see somebody else, I'm like, oh, I could talk about them, but we'll be here all day. So what I want to do today is I want to focus on a few things. A couple things when I felt when I just came into the church this morning is you guys, we're cut from the same cloth. When I'm in this room, I see warriors for God's kingdom who are going to stand in the face of adversity. That's who I feel, and that's who I know is in this room, that you guys are not the faint of heart. You guys are bold. And I would, and the Bible's so awesome because, the story of Gideon and the battle he's about to endure, right? And he has all these warriors, and then the Lord starts whittling this down, whittling this massive number of warriors that he had, and then he ends up with this small number, and he's like, okay, well, now we're good. And you're thinking typically that, man, if I had a whole bunch of people with me, I would be in a lot better shape. But if I have a whole bunch of people with me, like let's just say we're gonna go on a mission trip, right? And I've been on a handful of mission trips, and sometimes there's people on the mission trip, you're like, why are they here? Because you're trying to help the people. You're trying to help the people, right? You have a limited amount of time on a short-term trip, and you're trying to help the people. And then you have somebody who's like, I don't want to eat that food. I don't want to sleep in that bed. I need my shower. There's no hot water, and you're just like, and perhaps at some point in the very beginning, that was me. And so, but you're in a little bit of a shock, right? You get in there. I mean, on my first trip, I get in this bed and I start sleeping and I wake up and I'm like, what the heck? And I feel this stuff crawling all over me and I'm covered with ants, right? And so I wake up, I kill all the ants, I go back to bed. I wake up again, I kill all the ants, I go back to bed. And that was my introduction to Malawi. And so on our first trip. And so there, in this body, I can just feel your strength. I can feel your steadfastness that you guys, even in our weakness, God is strong, and that you're not the type of people that are just going to cave to the pressures and the things that we face in the world. Because we've faced tons of them, right? We've had pressure for the last, since the COVID pandemic, we've had a lot of pressure to conform and to obey. To obey an unjust society. And it's so awesome because, Jay, before I came this morning, I was praying about that bill, Senate Bill 5593, which is like that 101, the referendum 101, is to repeal that garbage legislation. And that legislation affects me every single day here in Spokane with the group homes I run, because I have a contract with the state of Washington to take high needs foster care kids. And I will just tell you straight up that the state of Washington does not have God's purposes in mind for these children. They feel they're trying to do something, right? But it does not, it's not what God would do and not the best way to raise children, okay? And so there is this huge push from the LGBT community to sexualize children. And I can tell you this, so in the transgender push, I look at packets from children that are requested for me to take them. They're high needs kids, very difficult. And all of the ones that have claimed a gender dysphoric ideology, gender identity, they have all been rooted in sexual abuse. There was not one child that was claiming to be the opposite sex that was not sexually abused. So do we see a problem there, and should we feed that, or should we address the trauma and the difficulty that the child has been through? So I'm in a big fight in that category. So I just want to say that I can feel your guys' support. I know that I'm not alone, and that this church plays a significant part of all the work we're doing, both here in the United States and across the world. And one of the crazy parts is sometimes I get a little baffled because I don't understand, well, I do understand how I got here, but I totally understand that I'm not qualified to be here. Does that make sense? So, high school dropout, I had a 1.8 GPA, boom, I killed it, So really, my high school degree is in automotive technology, all right? So I used to be able to fix people's cars. I'm pretty sure I don't know how to fix cars anymore because it's been a long time. But all that to say, I find myself in a position of having a voice at some pretty high-level tables. One of the things right now is there's this push, or there's this lawsuit that happened with the state of Washington a while back, and they are required to rewrite all of the Washington administrative codes that govern foster care, child placing agencies, treatment foster care, basically anything in the foster care world. They have to rewrite all of the Washington administrative codes. And I pushed myself into this committee, right? I didn't get invited. I invited myself, right? Hey, when am I coming to that meeting? And they blew me off multiple times, right? But I'm like that nagging wheel, like that squeaky wheel that's going to get oiled. And so I just kept on calling them up, saying, hey, I didn't see my invite yet, so I was just wondering what's going on there. And so anyways, after pushing for a while, I found myself on a select committee of 12 people. And so what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of subcommittees, and they're all going to be talking about how do we change these laws and some of them are really, really bad. Some of them are good. Please don't have your temperature above 110 degrees. Okay? That one's fine. I don't have a problem with that one because you don't want to scald kids when they're taking a shower. But I do have a problem with saying that a 12-year-old child who goes on the run, the law enforcement's not going to look for them. That is garbage, right? And that already exists, just in case you didn't know, that if a child is on the run at young as 12 years old, that the law enforcement is unable to pick them up and take them to a detention setting until they can re-engage with either their family or the group home or the shelter care that they were part of. And that's been going on for years. And so what happens is pedophiles, traffickers know these laws, and they see the kids, and from experience, if a child goes on the run, they are usually snatched up and sexually assaulted within, I would say, a day. I mean, I've seen it happen over and over and over because the predators, they can spot those kids a mile away. They show up downtown, they think they got all their game together, and they are super vulnerable. And so in this rewriting of the policies, we have this opportunity to hopefully push some solid common sense legislation and make some good positive changes. So I want to get into Malawi really quick. Fairly quick, but I wanted to focus on a few things because we're doing more than just Malawi, right? And when I was talking about who you guys are, I believe you guys are steadfast. I believe that in the Lord, that there's nothing that you can't accomplish. You know, in our weakness, which is so awesome because I'm extremely weak. I have lots of challenges in my own personal life, right? But one thing that I will do is I will say yes to the Lord no matter what he's calling me to do, even when it seems totally impossible for me to accomplish, because most of the time it is impossible for me to accomplish on my own. But in our weakness, the Lord is made strong. And it is such an awesome experience to be in a spot where you feel totally inadequate. You're struggling the whole time, right? Maybe you're even shaking, right? I don't know how many of you guys have done public speaking, but there was a season in my life when I had to do public speaking, terrified of the microphone. I'd get, hey guys, just like so scared, and everybody's cheering you on, especially in the Christian church. They're so nice to you. And you're like, come up there and you're really scared to speak, but you're supposed to. So you're like, okay, I gotta do it. Even today I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go to Liberty Church, and oh Lord, I'm so nervous. What if I don't even say anything good? There's always those kind of struggles. And but in our weakness, the Lord is made strong. And so when we choose to step into some of the difficult, when we choose to make a stand, even if you're standing all alone, it is a time for the Lord to work through you and in you, or actually in you and through you, right? That way, because that's what he does first, right? He'll work in us, and then he chooses to work through us as his body. And I covet those moments now. I mean, I say that in fear, knowing that more opportunities are going to come for me to struggle through something difficult, right? But there's such a blessing when we're in that spot. And I'll give you a quick example. During the COVID it's not even a pandemic really, it was all pretend. There was massive push on my business, the source, our ministry. Right now I have 65 employees roughly, and they're saying, we're not going to contract with you unless you have all your employees vaccinated. And I'm like, well, what about religious exemptions? And they're like, well, you can have them do a religious exemption, but you have to vet whether or not that religious exemption is valid. And I'm sitting there in this meeting, and at first I have like 4 other providers with me, and one by one they start caving. They start dropping, right? They're saying, okay, all of our staff are going to get vaccinated. And then it got down to the very end, the deadline, and there's just me. There's the source. And I went and told them, I said, I guess you guys are going to have to come pick up the kids. Because I do not have the constitutional right to vet my staff's religious exemption. They can say whatever they want if they want a religious exemption, and I do not have the right to say, I don't think your religious exemption is valid. And here's how it played out. My wife and I sat down and talked. Our Vice President, Julie Vinson, we were talking, and we're like, well, this is our line in the sand, and I told them to come get them, and they're like, come get the kids. And they're like, okay, let's move on. And the whole thing was dropped. I never heard another peep about the exemptions for my staff, the vaccinations, and but it was like it was challenging. You're like, oh man, I've put in 10 years of work into this, and now it's going to all be just disappear in a heartbeat. But that's not what ended up happening, because we stood on the side of righteousness and justice, and all of a sudden the wickedness said, oh, well, I guess we don't have the constitutional authority to make them do that. And so in regards to the Senate Bill 1, just know that I'm right I can't give you guys a lot of the details, but I'm right in the midst of that fire. And it's on multiple fronts, and I just need wisdom on how to operate, and that my team would have wisdom so that we can make the right decisions, because this is another one that, I want to read you guys a little poem real quick. This poem is by Martin Niemöller, if you guys ever heard of him, or if you've heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, two warriors who stood, and it cost them their lives, but warriors for God's kingdom in the midst of the Holocaust, of the Nazi Germany and their atrocities that we are committing on people. But this poem goes like this. It's fairly popular. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trades unionists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So we've heard that, many of us have heard that before, but really I believe that this is a Kairos moment for us. We exist at this point in time to be people who, despite our automotive technology degree, our 1.8 GPA, I'm called to make an impact in my sphere of influence, and it's the same for you guys, okay? So, and don't despise small beginnings. I say that all the time because my beginning was small, right? It was like, I remember when I quit my job and I'm like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna go mow lawns. And I was mowing lawns for money and just do whatever I could. I'm like repurposing furniture, just trying to figure out like, how am I gonna pay my house payment, you know? And I just didn't despise the small beginning. And now I find myself in a place of influence. And so, and it's, it's a huge blessing. So now I'm going to get into Malawi. And, my daughter, Noelle, can you wave? I think everybody knows you. Yeah, that's my precious daughter. She's straight back from Mongolia. She just spent 3 months in Mongolia doing Bible distribution and ministering with YWAM. That girl's a world changer. Very proud of her. And she also works, she has worked with the Source, and then she's coming back to work with us again now that she's home, and just sowing into the lives of her siblings to just, light a fire in them for what God's calling them to do. And so, but she was the catalyst for my first trip to Africa, and that was many years ago, I think 8 years ago. And so I've gone, I think, 8 or 9 times now, and God has been so, it's been so amazing being in Africa. And honest, I get a little covetous of my time there. I preach to people often, and when you go on the street and you preach to, Americans in Spokane, sometimes it's very, very dry. Like I do my best, and they just like stone cold you, just like, I'm like, man, I can't crack those people. What's wrong with this, When I first launched the group homes, I'm like, I can't wait to get them into a Christian environment and just love on them and watch them change. And I remember one kid, he's like, I'm going to pour hot oil in your face. And I'm like, Jesus loves you? So that's pretty much a true story. And so, but, and it's the soil over here needs a lot more tilling and a lot more fertilizer and a lot more, irrigation prior to getting cracked. I go to Malawi, I say a couple things, and then it's like repentance time. I'm like, Jesus loves you, and you shouldn't do that. It is so true, brother. I've seen police officers rebuked by a pastor on the side of the road, and they totally, repent right then and there for trying to embezzle us. And it was amazing. The pastor got out of the car. He's like, because he wanted 5,000 kwacha or something, which is like $4 for a taillight out. The taillight's not out, right? The guy just wants money because we're white. And the pastor gets out and he says, what are you doing? He's talking to the officer. What are you doing? He's like, these people are men and women of God, and they have come to serve our people. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, pastor. You guys may go. And I'm like, that was awesome. So on this past trip, we've made quite a bit of progress. I'm going to play this song first. I love their singing, and this is they're going to sing in English for us a little bit. But this is our church. We built this church for them with a team from Zion. This was probably 2000. What year was that? 2013, I guess. Do I hit what button? I don't hit any button. All right, so this past, the last time I was talking to Jay, and part of it, I have a little bit of a hard time sometimes with remembering and not suffering from severe deja vu when you're talking, right? When you go to different churches, speak on different things, you'll be up there, and I'm not sitting, seriously, I'll be sitting here like, did I already say that? I have no idea if I said that. So I was asking Jay, I'm like, what have I told you guys, And so anyway, and he's like, well, last time you were there was prior to, I've been to Malawi 2 times, I think, since last time I shared with you guys. And we went in September. Nehemiah was on that trip in the September one. And that's when we purchased this chunk of land. And so what we felt that the Lord wanted us to do, a couple years back, we started some orphanages, family style. So they're not run by white people, which are the Azungus, that's you and I. Even if you are not white, but you're Hispanic, you're still an Azungu. Gentlemen, you guys are Azungus. I'm sorry because you are American. And so even my African-American friends that go with me, they are Azungus. And they don't have any cultural, it's not like taboo, right? They'll just point at you, Azungu! And so they taught me to yell back at them, black man. And I'm like, that is so culturally wrong in America, We would be in huge trouble. But they are the most beautiful, innocent people, right? They're just so awesome, majority of them. And you always got the people that just want your money, but they are beautiful people. So what we ended up doing, we started a couple of orphanages. We have 2 homes running currently, run by the 2 guys that have, one guy that's pointing, that's John Ngoma. He's the senior director for the Source Malawi. The guy next to him in the suit, that is Mika Kayusa, and he is running the second house with his wife. The wife's, let's be real, Etta and Lucy are running the homes, and they are taking care of the kids. Okay, these guys just get to look cool. They're awesome men, but their wives are phenomenal people, and they work sun up till sundown, running the homes, taking care of the kids. And so what we do is we take kids that are that their families can't take care of them. Their parents are usually dead, deceased. We have like 6 orphans in our care right now. And then their extended families, they're so financially poor that the only thing they can do is they send the kids to the streets to beg. And they're like, we can send them to this school or to these homes, and they can get an education, get out of poverty. So we maintain the family connection with them. That's really important with the extended family that is around. But poverty is so real in Malawi. Average wage, $600 a year, and that's for a person with a job. And so they're so desolately poor. That little building you see in the back, that is a house right now. That's a shed that people are staying in, made out of corn stalks. That's where my other guys that you see on the right, they were living in that because they're guarding our land. And so they're so incredibly poor that it's just very difficult to make any progress. So what we decided to do is we want to rescue children. We want to rescue children that are orphans, and we want to give them a chance at life. And so one of the things that is one of our taglines is Kusunta Mioyo. Kusunta Mioyo means changing lives. That's in Chichewa. And my Chichewa is Pangono Pangono, which means bit by bit. And I get made fun of a lot. And then they just say to me, they say, "It is all right, Brother Chris. You are a go-go," and which means you're an old man and you can't learn. And so they don't hold back, right? They're beautiful. So anyways, this is our land. And so right now we're walking, this guy's name is Henry. Henry is a businessman. He drills wells. So right here we're doing, now, I don't know, I've done a few well projects, a couple building projects in the United States, and I don't know how well this worked, right? Because you have the water witchers that come out with the sticks, right? And they're like, put it there, okay? And then we did this one when we were doing our house, which was used sonar and a GPS, which I thought was a lot more legitimate. These guys came out with a 12-volt battery to a car, and some wires and a couple rods. And I'm just watching him like, I don't know if that's legit or not, right? and then you just look at the little analog dial, and he's like, doo-doo-doo, and like pound it in the ground. And then I'm looking at the analog dial. I don't think I saw the thing move one time. And then like, we'll put the hole here. And so anyway, but that's what we did. located our spot for a well. And Henry's an awesome guy. He's been great to work with. That is John, again, that is John and Goma, the director. And when we bought the land last year, the first thing the church did is they all came out and they planted crops immediately. Like they didn't waste any time. As soon as the season hit, they came out and they planted corn. The main staple in Malawi is maize, which is corn flour ground up into like a cream of wheat type of meal, like a thick cream of wheat, but it's cream of corn. And that's like the main food. And if you ask them, that's so funny. It is the most bland, boring tasting stuff. I'm like, what's your favorite food? My favorite food is sema. And sema is the lump of cream of wheat, or cream of corn. But they love it. So here they are making mud bricks for the security house. This is John pretending like he dug that ditch by hand. The guy behind him dug that ditch by hand. So, but both John and I, I'm like, hey, we show up, and these guys, I want to just talk about the Malawian people. They're so awesome. Okay, so that gentleman behind John, him and his team, they've been working since sunup. We got there, this is probably like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're pretending, I'm like, hey, why don't we pretend like we did all this work? And we're like, and those guys are sweaty, dirty, covered. So we take some pictures, and they laugh at us because we're trying to claim, they're just sweet people. And we're getting ready to drive off, and I say to John, because they're going to go back and sleep in that little corn hut I showed you, right? And this is like, we're out in the middle of, we're probably like a half mile from the village and out in the country. And I say, hey, do they have any food? And then John says, maybe they do, maybe they don't. And it's so common for people to be hungry over there that it's just they don't really give much of a thought. And so I say, hey, we'll ask him. And they're like, hey, do you guys have anything to eat? And they're like, we have nothing. And they've worked all day physically hard. Now they're going to do security all night and guard the well that we drilled. And they have nothing to eat. And so I give them 5,000 kwacha, $3, and they are like, woohoo, because they get dinner that night. And so just their work ethic is so awesome. And they're so grateful that money is coming because they have a job at the moment and they're going to get paid in the future. And they're just so grateful to be able to be working. So this is how they make bricks in Malawi. It's interesting. So that machine just goes up and down and then cuts the bricks. And then we're making the bricks right here for the orphan home that we're building. The guy in the blue shirt that looks all jacked, that's my friend Charlie. He came with me. He's an Azungu. He's an African American from the United States. So there's our bricks. So this is after they poured the slab for the first house on the property. And forgive the pictures. The Malawian phones are, they're not your iPhone, whatever number we're at nowadays, 15 or whatever. So those are the outside edges of the property. And those are the walls going up. All done by hand, no power tools at all. They mix all the mortar by hand. Scott, you remember mixing mortar in Mexico? Yeah, that was easy compared to what these guys have to do. So they just do it all by hand. And that's the trusses going on. I sent them some plans, because the structural stuff, they don't do the same kind of building as Americans, and I just want some structure to it. So they even when they send me the stuff, they're like, it's strong and it's nice and strong, and I'm like, I don't think it is. So, because like for instance, those columns, they're not supposed to be red bricks. Like I told them they're supposed to be the concrete ones because those red bricks are basically baked mud, and I don't want to stand under baked mud, But they're doing the best they can, and sometimes there's a language barrier and a cultural barrier, right? So that's the progress of the first home. This is a little bit backwards. We did the well first. This is the well driller company run by Henry. And this is when in order to glue them together, they basically just melt them with fire is how they're doing it. And then that's the pipe that's going to go down the borehole. Mixing concrete by hand. And this is after it's all finished. They got it nice and shaped with a little drain basin to get the water away. And then the girls, they work so hard. They're in charge of those buckets, and you'll have these women and Malawian people. I'm a big man in Malawi, right? And I'm 5'8", right? So in America, I'm always, getting underhooks on my hug, because everybody's way up here for the dudes. But in Malawi, I'm like, what's up, little guy? And so, seriously, like a 4'5" 5 guy, you know, and I'm like, he's like right here. I'm like, this is what everybody feels when they're standing next to me. It's, I want to challenge him to basketball so bad, you know, so, but not football or soccer because they'll destroy me, so. This is our digging crew, and then the tall guy on the left, that's my buddy Charlie, that's from America, and then Raphael is next to him. He's part of our team, and then the construction workers, then Mika, and then the other guys, I don't remember their names. So one of the parts that's really cool is that when we're doing these projects, we're hiring the churches, right? So they don't have jobs, so we hire people from our churches to come in and help on the construction projects to be laborers so that they can make money. So it's super cool. We raised enough money to drill the well. I love this. Now, if that's not a welding shop and fabrication company, I don't know what is. The name is God is Good. All right. So they'll do that a lot. They have a lot of names in Malawi where they're like, you know, Jesus' best fabrics. You know, it's like, well, why would I shop anywhere else? This is where Jesus' best fabrics are, and you know. And if you're going to get welding and fabrication, you want to get it from God is Good because we all know that God is good and he can throw a mean weld on that project. So they made our doors. These are the doors for the house, and they made all of our windows. This is myself and Edward. Edward was our driver, and we had enough money that we were able to raise enough money from your guys' donations and other people that have helped me. I was able to raise quite a bit of money, and couple of the items on the project were, one, we needed water, get our well in, raise enough money to start the construction on the first house, and then the other one was get a vehicle because, like I said, that it's a little bit further away, and we got to get our kids to school when they're living out there. So we were in this rental vehicle, and Edward's the driver, and we're kind of shopping around looking at different vehicles, and then Edward says, we should call my boss. I will bet you he will sell you the car. And so he sold us the rental car, and that's a testimony in itself because the owner of the rental car company, his name was Jeffrey, and we meet with Jeffrey, and Jeffrey's like, hey, I want 18 million kwacha, or whatever the figure was. And at this point in time, Charlie and we had spent all of our kwacha. Basically, when I say 18 million, that sounds like a massive figure. Well, understand that $1 American is like 1,500 kwacha. Okay, so, and their biggest bill is a 5,000 note kwacha. So when you change $1,000, you're getting $2.50 bills. And so we have, backpacks full of kwacha, just huge amounts of kwacha. So anyways, we're talking to Jeffrey, and I tell him, he gives me the price, and we're like 5,000 shy of what it cost to build or to buy the car. And I say to him, I said, this is all we have. And he says to me, he goes, how can I not support the work that God is doing with you guys in Malawi? He goes, I will sell you the car. And I'm just like, cool, thanks, man. So he sells us the car, and then John has his driver's license now, and the first time ever having a vehicle for them and the families. But it was just such a blessing, and their understanding of Scripture and of God, when it's a believer, they don't, it's like, how can I argue with what God's doing? Well, I need more money. That's why I can argue with it. But he's just like, no, I'll give it to you at that price. And took the rest of our kwacha, and it was like a great deal. So just very blessed by all that. It was super cool. So we said 15,000. That's not what I paid. And then we did Bible distribution. And you ever try to give a white person a Bible in America? Right. They don't want the Bible. Over there, oh my gosh, they were like lining up to get the Word of God in Chichewa, just lining up. And it was such a blessing to be able to distribute Bibles. We didn't have enough, and we just went out and distributed. But then what we would do is we're like, okay, time to start Bible studies. You guys make your groups. You come in Wednesdays, Tuesdays, read together, study together. And so the pastors over there, they're awesome. They're awesome at tending their flock, and they're in charge of making sure that the Bibles can be shared. So we felt that the Lord wanted us to do baptisms, and so we went looking for a tank because the rivers are all nasty, and you don't want to go in the water over there. They're contaminated. The sewage runs right into them, and so you don't want to go there. Everybody's bathing in them, and they're difficult. So we went shopping for something to baptize people in. I'm like, we need like a horse trough that you would have. Malawi does not have horse troughs, right? Did you think that would be the best thing, right? Big old open container. So we found these water tanks. After I actually looked at a porcelain bathtub. And I'm like, what about that porcelain bathtub? And we're like, what are we going to do with it afterward, you know? So we settled on this thing. We chopped the top of it off, and it turned into our baptism. So, and then we baptized a whole bunch of people. It was super awesome. And I put this in here for a reason. This is the well that Liberty Remnant Church drilled for us, last year? And the donkey came to get a drink. And so I figured you guys, it was awesome. It's doing very, very good. I talked to the villagers. They said they have had 0 issues with the well. It's producing good water, and it has transformed that community. We have a church plant that's right there, and that church is exploding. Charlie in the video, it was awesome. We're like, we needed to get some funding for the church to build, and we're thinking, okay, we can build a okay building that's usable for $6,000. He makes like 2 calls. We have the money that day to start the construction project on the church that's right next to the well here. So because they've been meeting, but they've been under. Remember the picture of the corn stalks? They've been meeting under something like that at the moment. So anyway, it's been pretty cool. So then this is the end of the slide, I believe. How do I get the sound to come on? So, did you see all those chickens? So I took that picture, and I'm like, I wonder if those chickens' heads ever get caught in the wheel. The next day, I'm not kidding. Saw another guy doing that, and the chicken's head was missing. I'm like, guess he didn't make it. So, and it's if you're a PETA person and you are for the ethical treatment of animals, Malawi's not the place for you. So it's a little bit different. So anyway. It's been quite the experience. But so our construction on our house is moving right along. Right now we're at the phase where they're putting the iron sheets on the roof, and they're working on plastering the walls. And then after that we have to tile the floor, and then it's pretty much livable. And we'll move our first family in as soon as the roof is finished. And then our goal is to just start construction on the next house. We want 2 houses on the property, and then our community center. And what I really felt the Lord was speaking to me pretty strong on this last one was our need for a school. The kids, they don't have access to education. And all the kids running around that area, they don't go to school. And so then their life is going to be agricultural farming, and that's going to be what they do. And I really felt that we have an obligation to really try to help those villagers start getting an education and bring our kids in and really start having that community focus where they're able to put their skills and resources together to become more self-sufficient, right? They're pretty reliant on us at the moment for just basically for finances to be able to do the work they're doing. And they're extremely good stewards, which makes it really easy for me to want to go ask people for money to help us because they are faithful. Like, I mean, you go over there and, have you ever had somebody want to come over to your house and you needed to make it look better than it actually usually is, right? Because perhaps maybe you don't have all your ducks in a row or whatever. And so when you're putting on a big event, if it was fake and they're doing the feeding program, because we feed 150 kids a week, if they never feed the kids, you would see that it would be chaos, right? But we go in there, all the kids know what's happening. They're all lining up in their groups. They're getting over at the table or on the floor area that they're supposed to eat. They have songs that they know. They're learning English. And so they're not able to just pretend, right? They're actually being good stewards of the resources that we're helping provide. The other area that we're pushing to do is to help them with farming. So we have this property. They took it very first year. They made $6,000 worth of maize. The very first year and I didn't say, hey, go plant corn. They just said, we need to make some money. And they raised $6,000 in maize, which is equivalent to 10 people's year wages in Malawi. And so, because they make $600 a year. And so at that amount, they're just being good stewards. And so the next thing is animals. We're going to start doing, they want to do pigs. I don't like pigs, but I don't live there. And so so we're going to do some pigs and some goats. And then maybe if we can get the property next door, we'll do some cows, because then you're rich. If you have cows, you're rich in Malawi. And so, but they will use that to generate income by selling animals and raising animals. So we are heading back in September. I have a team going, and on this one, we're going to be building our second church, getting that started. I'm going to be running a lot of the logistics for it. We'll be working on our land, helping to develop, whatever they need. And then there's a network of about 60 different churches that we're affiliated with, and we'll be doing church ministry, right? So we show up at the church, into the village, we'll go through, recruit people to come to the meeting, and then they just say, but they don't even say anything. They basically, you get there, they don't talk to you much, right? And then they just go, Pastor Chris? I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to say something? And so it's kind of like that. They don't prep you. Don't say, you'll be doing all the services, but just know that when you guys come on our team, you will be doing all the services. So, and it's awesome, And then even, oh my gosh, so funny. So I do the whole service, right? And I'm done. Right? And I just gave my best speech ever. I did as good as I could administering, and then they're like, and what else? And I'm like, what else? Yeah, because they have the Malawian time, and then there's the American time. And I've seen it so many times where we ended church at 11:30, we left, I forgot something, so I came back, and they're having church without us, right? Because they understood our culture, that we only go from 9 to 12, and then we're tired. We got to go rest. And they're like, it's an all-day event, So anyway, that's a little bit. Another thing, I'll just share this last little thing before I wrap it up. We were talking about fasting and prayer, and and we're like, yeah, Charlie and I, we just did 6 days fasting, and he's like, and they're not bragging. They just say, yeah, we go to the mountain. They go to the mountain like once every other month, and they go for 40 days. No, I'm not kidding. I'm like, what do you take? Water. And they sleep on the ground, and they pray all day. And I'm like, what? This is just how we do it. And I'm like, man, I want hunger like that. I want to be hungry like that. And they're not. They don't judge me, right? They're not like making fun of me or anything like that. They don't feel super high and spiritual above me, but they challenge me. They challenge me with their hunger for the Lord, with their work ethic, with their willingness to live sacrificially. And I want more of that in my life. We are so blessed in America, like so blessed to be part of this awesome country. And I'm a firm believer that we're blessed to be a blessing. That I can utilize the resources, the wealth, the skills, the things that I have. I can sow those into other people, and we can make an impact. We can make a difference, which I believe you guys are. Like as Jay, you're talking and hearing about the different ministries, the gentleman who shared right before me, what you guys are doing, that's awesome, man. And I love it, And it's so important for us. Like we have a group of maybe 60, 70 people here, that we don't despise small beginnings, right? The Lord, He chose 12 people. I think one of them had an education. And everybody else, like the first ones, were all just out there fishing, right? And He just says, hey, you, and you. And they're like, I don't qualify, but the rabbi just called my name, and they just jump in. And so that we don't despise small beginnings, and that we just allow ourselves to continually say yes to God's call on us, and that we allow Him to continually work in us and through us. And together, every time I'm out there on the field, anything I'm doing, I recognize how I got here. And I didn't get here on my own. I said yes, but then people in my weakness, they rallied and said, we'll help you get there. And even with the small things, hey, here's $20. That $20 was huge. I took a kid out to eat with that $20, right? A kid who didn't have any food. And it takes us all doing our part in the body to make the body function correctly. And so anyway, I'm just blessed to be with you guys and excited about our next trip. And in the future, we're going to probably be going 2 times a year. And so on this next trip, I'm taking, I think, 12 12 of us. And shortly after that, I think I'm going to be going in the spring. Well, I have to go in the spring because Courtney's coming with me. And so, and that's when his time's coming. And so, and if you guys are interested, just talk to Jay and Jamie and talk to Courtney because then we can see about what we can do is getting some of you guys out there. But I wish when I was a child or when I was a new believer, I went to Mexico one time and then I got derailed from overseas missions. But I think everybody should, especially every young person coming up, should have the opportunity to go overseas and to just allow God to use you and work through you in a different culture. It just melts your heart, man. My heart is wrecked for the Malawian people. And I believe in the near future that the source will be working in other nations as well. I don't know what that looks like, but I like to speak those things that are not as though they are, because then you have that perhaps God. You know that one story. Who is it? Is it Dave or Jonathan and his armor bearer? He said, "Okay, if they call us up there, we'll know the Lord gave them into our hands. If they come down here, we're going to know the Lord gave them into our hands." And you're like, "What?" And then like, perhaps God. You know, and so and that's where we want to be, in a spot where we just are obedient, and then allow God to meet us and to work through us. So.